So let's create the toolpath to mill these letters, and I created something a little bit more complicated because I want to show you the power of Blender and the FabEX CNC add-on. I've made two layers. The CNC text is higher than the 8 sleep and repeat text, so we are going to split this into two operations, but the results will be more interesting. Of course, I could make a simple toolpath, 3D surface toolpath, but I don't want to do that. I want the letters to be nicely contoured. I want the edges to look good, and that means I have to create a toolpath that follows the shape of the letters. Before starting the operation, I want to talk to you a little bit about the toolbit and the importance of the toolbit. Because the remaining pieces, the letters, are going to be very small pieces of material. There's a high risk of the material breaking. This is why I'm using a downcut bit. It tends to push the material down, which means there's a less chance of pieces of wood trying to fly away. How do I create a toolpath that follows the shape of the letters? In Blender, using the FabEX CNC add-on, I can easily do that by going here, going to the curve tools, and select the Get Pocket Surfaces option. And even though it doesn't do anything at first, that is because the Z limit is set at 0. This is a top limit, so I want to set it equal to the total height of the object, which is 16 millimeters. Once I change this, you can see that I have 4 objects, 4 curves created in the tree. They are also grouped in a separate collection, the multi-level pocket. And that is really useful to make G-code to follow certain shapes when I'm using a mesh. Now let's identify what represents each of these objects so we can rename them. First, I have this base 002. Let me just hide the 3D object. So the base 002 is an outline of the entire text and the plate. Press F2 and name it entire object. Base 003 is the top text, which in this situation I don't need, so I can delete it. Base 004 is the CNC text, so let's rename it CNC text. And base 005 is the repeat text isolated. I also don't need this one, so I can press delete to remove it. I'm going to make two operations. I'm going to split the milling in two parts. One to mill everything except the CNC text up to the other texts, and then another operation to mill all the remaining material so I can have all the letters. But for the CNC text, I don't have an outline. I could simply go into edit mode and create a rectangle to define the outline, but I have an easier method. Well, it's not easier in this situation, but if the shape was irregular, this could be very useful. So let's go back to the base object, turn on its visibility, select it in the 3D view, and click this button, Object Silhouette. Now let's hide it again, and you can see it created a curve which represents the entire outline of the object. The first milling should stop when these letters start. Let's see what height that is. In order to detect the height of this surface, let's select the 3D object, press Tab to enter edit mode, press 1 or click here to select vertices. Let's zoom in a little bit. And now let's select one of the vertices on this face. Go here and see the Z value is 13 millimeters. Press Tab again to exit edit mode. Now let's select the CNC text and set its Z value to 13. And the base silhouette, which is the outline of the entire object, let's also move this to 13 millimeters. Now let's select the CNC text and the base silhouette, hold Ctrl down, move the mouse in the 3D view and press Ctrl J to join them in one single curve. Now if I hide the base object, you can see that I have this curve that perfectly defines this text and the outline of the object, so I can use it as a base for my CNC operation. The second object that I will use is already at the correct height. It's this text that has all the letters, so I don't need the 3D view anymore. Now let's take the first part of the milling, the CNC text, and let's mill everything up to the face of the rest of the text. Let's go to the Render tab and change the render engine to FabEX CNC. In the operations group, let's press on the plus button. Now I have a new operation here which I can set up using this tab here, the CNC. Let's set the strategy to pocket. The type is going to be perimeter, the start position inside. The overshoot is a good option for the text because it will move a little bit farther, not just go around the letter, which means I have less chance of splinters of material breaking, especially when I have taller letters. Let's change the step over to 3.175 millimeters. And I'm using this value because I want a 50% engagement. Since I'm using a 6.35 millimeters toolbit, a 1/4 of an inch toolbit, it means that the step over has to be 1/8 of an inch, which is 3.175. For the safe height, I'm going to use a value of 20 millimeters. The object is 16 millimeters. Let's start the operation at exactly 16 and leave the final depth set by the object. Because we've already set the height of this curve, now I can use that height for the operation to end. I can leave the layers checked, it doesn't really matter because I'm just going to mill 3 millimeters and I can mill that in a single pass. But if I had to mill a lot more and I had to use, let's say, a step down of 3 millimeters, I would set here a 3 millimeters layer height. Now let's define the cutter. It's an end mill. The diameter is 6.35 millimeters, 2 flutes, and I can enter the description. I'm not going to use that. It says here engagement 50%. That is why I've set previously the step over to 3.175. For the speeds, I'm going to set a feed rate of 3000 millimeters per minute and a spindle speed of 20,000 RPM. Another thing that is defined a little bit different in FabEX than other CNC, other CAM programs, and the plunge speed, which is the speed on the Z-axis, is defined as a percentage of the speed on X and Y. My machine can easily handle 100% plunge speed, so now everything is set up. I need to do a few more things. First, check the output trailer and right here M02. This means the machine will stop after making the entire operation. Otherwise, it will keep on running, keep on spinning. I have to stop it manually. I don't like it, so I'm always checking this box and I write M02 here. Since I want very smooth sides on the letters, I'm going to set the milling type to conventional. It seems that the conventional cut is not such a great idea in this material. You can see here at the end a little piece broke off, so I'm going to create the second toolpath, the one for the even smaller letters, and I'm going to use a climb cut. The cutter spin depends on the machine. Generally it is clockwise, but if you have a different machine, make sure you set the cutter spin accordingly. That is all I need to set here. I can click on the calculate path and export G-code button, which will draw this toolpath. You can see it's selected by default, and double check to see everything is okay. It seems okay. I can check on the left in the panel the time, which is 6 minutes 57 seconds. But in reality, it will take a little bit longer because this time calculation doesn't take into account the acceleration and deceleration of the machine. Now I can export this file and move to the machine. What you need to know when exporting the G-code file is that you need to have the Blender file saved and the G-code file will be in the same folder. Otherwise, you will struggle to find the G-code file, which is not something that you want. So remember, first save the Blender file and you will find the G-code files in the same folder. In the video about creating this vacuum clamp, you can see the link here in the corner. I've said that for the next project I will be using the clamp. Well, I'm not going to do that, and that is because this type of wood, which is beech, most probably is not airtight because I've tried holding it down. It simply doesn't work. It moves around. Let me just turn on the pump so you can see. And as soon as I close the valve, it just releases everything. That is why I'm going to give up for this project, and I'm going to use screws as always. And it has nothing to do with the clamp because I've tried with different material. With a piece of oak, a thicker piece of oak, it holds down really well. What I believe to be true is that this type of material isn't really airtight. Now that we have the first part of the text already milled, let's hide the toolpath. Let's also hide the object that we've used. And now we need to make another operation pretty similar to the first one, but it needs to go a little bit deeper and it needs to avoid the shape of these other two texts. In order to do this really quick, I have this button here, which is copy the active CAM operation. Let's copy it and let's make the necessary modifications. First of all, I need to change the object from the base silhouette, the one with the CNC. I want to use the entire object as base for this operation. I need to modify a few more things here. Of course, the operation setup is the same. The operation area needs to be changed. I need to change the operation depth start to 13 millimeters because all the other material has already been removed, so I won't have any air time. All the other settings should be the same, so I just need to change the base and the start depth. Since the object is correctly placed at 10 millimeters, let me just check this. You can see the location is at 10 millimeters. I can click on the calculate path button and I have the new toolpath created. I will repeat the same process. Click on the export G-code button. If you want to name the files a little bit more friendly, you have here an option for each of the operation to change the file name. So as you have seen, and it's easily to see in the 3D view, there are some portions that haven't been cut because the cutter simply doesn't fit in these areas. Let's solve this. Let's make a new operation with another toolbit. I will change the toolbit, reset the Z value, and then we will make a new operation. But I don't need to mill all this material because it is already milled. I just need to follow the contour. So let's create a new operation, but first let's select the entire outline. If I keep this selected, the new operation will have this toolpath as a base, and that is not something that I want. So let's select the proper object, click on the plus button, and now let's set things up. I'm going to leave the strategy as profile, cut on the inside, set the safe height to 20 millimeters, the operation start depth at 13 because the CNC text is correctly profiled. I just need to mill some additional parts for the smaller text. And I'm going to use a layer of 1.5 millimeters because I'm going to use a much smaller tool bit this time, and 3 millimeters is too much. I'm going to use an end mill of 3.175, an eighth of an inch, with a feed rate of 2500 millimeters per minute and a spindle speed of 20,000 RPM. Again, the plan speed, I will set it to 100% and check the output trailer option. Change the milling time to conventional, and now I can click on the calculate path button to see the new toolpath. I will not hide the previous operation because there are some things that I want to double check before exporting it. You can see here, most probably I will have some material not properly removed, so I will need to make some modifications. Let's go up and modify this count value, change it to 2, leave the direction inside out and set a step over of 1.59 millimeters, which is half of the tool bit. If I now click the calculate path button again, you can see that I have 2 passes, which will take a little bit longer, but this is something that I really want to happen because I want to make sure that all of the material is properly removed. Now let's export the G-code for this operation, so click on the export G-code button and let's see what happens. And now you can easily see why I recommended to use a downcut bit, why I said that I will use a downcut bit and why I always recommend that. That is because I didn't have a downcut bit for the 3.175, I only had an upcut. And let me just zoom in a little bit. And you can see the edges are not as good as with a downcut. And as you can see, with a little bit of cleaning, everything starts to look really good. I still have to cut the excess material using the bend saw. When I don't have these higher pieces, I can easily sand everything and get to the final shape of the side. So I've told you at the beginning of the video that I will show you how I modeled this time. First I will add a cube, click the mouse, hold it, move to define the area, and then release the mouse button, lift up to define the height, and another click to finish adding the cube. It doesn't have the proper dimensions and it is not positioned correctly. Let's press N to bring the side menu, go to item, and now let's give it dimensions. I want it to be 400 millimeters by 170 millimeters with a total height of 10 millimeters, which is the height of the base. It's not the entire object because the text will be higher than this. Now let's bring it to the correct position. I can set the X and the Y and the Z half of the values here, but I don't like that method. I like to press Tab to enter edit mode, press 1 to select vertices, select this, press Shift S and select cursor to select it. Now press Tab again to exit edit mode and enter object mode, right click, set origin to 3D cursor. Now I can set the location using 0 values for all the 3 axes and the object will be positioned in this corner, in the positive X, Y and Z. Now that I have the base ready, let's add the text. First let me use the select tool, go to the add menu, and here I have the text option. Now let's press Tab to edit the text, to edit the letters. I will write here it sleep. Press Tab again to go back to object mode. Let's add another object, another text. Press Tab again to edit CNC and another text. Repeat. Now let's resize the text, let's give it some volume and position it on the base. I will first take the CNC text, go here to the data group, and in the geometry tab, let's set an extrude value of 6 millimeters. This is the height that I want the object to have. But as you can see, it sets 6 millimeters from the origin up and down, so it ends up being 12 millimeters, which I don't want. So let's go back to the extrude value and set a value of 3 millimeters. This will result in a text of 6 millimeters height. Now let's change its dimensions. For that I'm going to the font group and here under the transform I have the size. And now with the move tool I can move it on the 3 axes. I think it should be a little bit smaller. Probably 0.095 should do it. And let's sort of center it. Now I can take the other two texts and repeat the same process. So let's set an extrude of 1.5 millimeters. I want this text to be 3 millimeters high, and scroll down to the size. Move it around in order to position it correctly. Let's do the same for the repeat, but this time I want to remember the size, which is 0.07, so this text will have the exact same dimensions. And I think I should make everything a little bit smaller. I will use a value of 0.055 and do the same for the repeat. Now I think everything should fit. And I will also overlap the letters a little bit, so you can see what happens when you have this situation, how to try to get the most out of such a situation. And I will select all the three texts using Shift and move them a little bit to the left. Now that I have all the texts correctly positioned, correctly dimensioned, I need to make all of this just one object to have a single object. But before making the join to group everything into a single object, I want to make a backup of these texts. I want to be able to edit them easy, to know their position, their size, everything. So let's make a backup. In order to do that, I will create a new collection. Press F2 to rename it Backup. Select the three objects by pressing Shift and again Shift D to duplicate. Click, and now I have this copy which I will drag into the backup collection and turn off its visibility, of course, because I don't want that. But there is a little problem. If you take a look at this text, it goes below the surface of the base. So how do I solve this? Turn on snapping, select face, move it upwards first, then move your mouse along this face, so anywhere on the face, and the text will be positioned from this face up. Why did I first move it up? Let me show you what happens if I take the Z-axis movement and move the mouse along this face. You can see that it will go from the face down, so that is why I first move it upwards, then repeat the process, and it will place it on top of this face. So let's do this for the third text, and now everything is positioned correctly. I can now go and join everything. I will create a new collection so I have all the text in just one collection. Let's rename it text and move these three objects inside it. And let's also rename the cube which is the base. And I will also duplicate this one, and because of the snapping it doesn't work as it should. Press escape to keep its dimensions exactly as the original. So whenever you are duplicating an object, if you don't want it to be moved, no matter where it goes on the screen, press escape and it will be in the exact same position as the original. And let's also move this base to the backup group, so we have all the sign as a backup. Why did I create this collection? Because I want to be able to join this face with all these three pieces of text using just one modifier. Why am I using a modifier? Because if I don't do that, I will have some overlapping faces here between the text and this face, and I will have a lot of problems when creating the toolpath. I also need to do one more thing before joining them. I need to move these three pieces of text with a very small amount downwards, and that is because I want them to be connected to this face, not sitting on top of it. To move them 0.001 downwards, I can drag this and move it anywhere, it doesn't really matter. Open this window and here write minus 0.001. And now it is overlapping with this object, so when I'm going to create a single object out of them, those faces will be removed and everything will be connected. I cannot select everything and press Ctrl J to join them. Again, I'm going to have that problem, so let's go to the base, go to modifiers, add a new modifier, search for the Boolean modifier, select union, change the operand from object to collection, and here you can see the reason why I created this collection, the text collection. Select it from the list. So you can see I have an error. I have to go here, select the three text objects and go to Object, Convert to Mesh. They were texts and it didn't work. Now that I've converted them to meshes, they all work. I can turn off the visibility for the text because now the base has these letters embedded. That is all you need to create this kind of science with text. You can use several heights, you can do whatever you want, you can even position the text on a curve. What you need to know here is that in order for them to be correctly connected, you need to use a Boolean modifier, not join them, and they need to be slightly overlapping.